Recording in progress.
Green arrow alpha. Good evening. It's Monday, June 3rd, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting, City of Franklin. Madam Clerk, please take the roll slowly.
Mayor Nelson.
Here.
Alderman Hofer.
Here.
Alderwoman Eichman.
Here.
Alderman Hassan.
Here.
Alderwoman Day. Here. Alderman Barber. Absent. Excuse. Alderman Craig.
Present.
5 present, 1 absent. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So moving on to item B, governmental training presented by the League of Wisconsin Municipalities. Gentlemen, if you would please state your name and business address for the record, and then you will start driving this train. Just bring it right up like karaoke. It's movable.
Okay.
Bring it right there.
Matt Becker, League Insurance Company. We are in Madison, Wisconsin.
And I'm Jerry Deshane, the Executive Director of the League itself. Our address is the same.
Could we have it just for the record? It says Madison.
131, excuse me. Wrong, 316 West Washington Avenue, Suite 600, Madison 53703. That's right, that other building fell down. No, they tore it down.
Wasn't our fault.
Well, thank you very much.
We didn't break it.
So welcome, and this is, you'll be steering the ship with your presentation. Thank you very much. I would ask that the council, or however you want questions to come in during your presentation, if you want to, however you want the questions to come in, because I have a few as we go. I'm sure the other alders will, perhaps some scenarios.
Matt, did you want to start, or do you want me to just go ahead and dive in?
No, I've been here, I think, about a year ago, as well as plenty of times with the staff, working on various things, trainings, resources available to the city. But wanted to kind of touch on an area that's really not quite my expertise, and Jerry and his group, it is. Jerry's got a lot of experience in the local government sector, and our companies, while separate, work very close together. So where we need resources, we can bring them in. We know who's the expert at it. So really, this is Jerry's show here today, but if you have any questions, I run your insurance company, so any of the litigation and cases involving you, that's our company that's handling it at the moment.
Great. And for my part, why don't I start with an introduction of myself, and then I'll introduce the league. I've been doing governance my whole life, essentially. I have been involved in a variety of boards, councils, commissions. I served on the Stoughton Public School Board for about 8 years. For the last 16 years, I've been the president of one of Wisconsin's larger charter school boards. I was a reporter early in life. I've been a lobbyist with the state legislature for about 30 years. I did the math on it, and I have been either in or on or watching boards, councils, committees, city councils, village boards for approximately the last 44 years. And along the way, you pick up an awful lot of good ideas, bad ideas, best practices, worst practices, and on and on and on. In addition to that, the League was created in 1898 by local mayors, by local council members, to be a resource for you. We were created by a bunch of city council members, and our job is to help you do your job. It's that simple. How we do that continues to evolve, but the fundamentals of it haven't changed. I always start this presentation by pointing out that we are a nonpartisan organization. Our staff are specifically prohibited from getting involved in local elections for obvious reasons. But as far as an organization, we don't have a political action committee. We don't get involved in legislative elections. The greatest compliment, I would say, is some of our members who tend to lean left politically think of the League as a conservative organization, and some of our members that tend to lean right politically think of us as a liberal organization. So I have a funny feeling we're kind of right where we belong. And we truly try to reflect our members, and our members are you. Our job is to simply provide you with the resources so that you get to do the fun stuff, which is making local decisions. I like to say we wrote the book on local government. That is literally true. We are annually writing manuals on various sectors of government operations. There's about a 200-page handbook for Wisconsin municipal officials. You probably have a copy. For the rest of you, if you have insomnia, I recommend it. It's good reading for that. We also, as you can see, we write the municipal licensing manual for regulation of alcoholic beverages, the handbook for police and fire commissioners. I'm leaving a number of resources at your table tonight. Those resources were specifically written for local elected officials. The pamphlet is a fairly high-level review of the position of either local alder or local village trustee. We use those somewhat interchangeably. The little card on Robert's Rules of Order, I think you will find very handy. For some reason, we think that when citizens are elected to public office in Wisconsin, that you are born with an understanding of Robert's Rules of Order. And everyone kind of scratches their head. And the reality is Robert's Rules of Order is a book with 800 pages. I defy anyone to tell you that they are truly a master of it, although one of our attorneys claims to be. But that note card that you have is essentially the basics of Robert's Rules of Order and how you run a meeting, how a meeting should proceed, with the order of motions, things like that. The other thing that the League is an extremely valuable resource on is where your connection to other cities. Very often, you will find yourself in the middle of an issue and wondering, has anybody else lived through this? Well, chances are the answer is yes. And that if you're not familiar with it, we can put you in touch with a place that has dealt with this. I should say before I go any further, please ask me questions. I will just rattle on and on if you don't stop me. I only have about 7 slides, but I wrote these slides, and with the assistance of a couple of attorneys in our office and our member services director, who's a professional trainer, we wrote these slides with an eye toward having a discussion. So please feel free to stop me as we go along, raise specific questions about specific issues. I will tell you what I did not do when I wrote this presentation. I didn't study the city of Franklin. I didn't sit down and watch all of your board meetings on YouTube. I will confess that I looked at one for about an hour or so, and that was long enough. But I don't come here with sort of a prescription of, well, you're doing these 6 things right, you're doing these 3 things wrong, you're doing these 7 things, please try this, that, or the other thing. That's not where this slideshow came from. This slide presentation is a gathering of what we perceive as the best practices in local government for local governing officials. I also want to say this is not a lesson in everybody get along and play nice, because the reality is representative democracy was built for disagreement. If you all agreed on the direction the city of Franklin should go, there would be no reason to have 7 of you sitting up there. 1 would be just fine, because the other 6 would spend their life going, yes, that's okay with me.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Neither do I. Question, what would be, if I could just, I'm looking through these things, these are amazing and very informative. So I don't know who we should go to request more of these, because I would definitely like more of like every one of our staff that's in the clerk's office, deputy clerk. I mean, I want, these are great things. I mean, these are wonderful.
There's an order form on our website, but if you'll give me a number, I'll send them to you.
Okay, we'll get back to you, but thank you.
Yeah.
This is really neat.
Well, and thanks, Mayor. Those are fairly recent additions to the list of publications that we have. All right. So representative democracy was built for disagreement. It was built with the understanding that in any community, and basically I would go so far as to say any city, any state, any country throughout the world, they all rely to one degree or another on representative democracy. And I use that term, it's not a pure democracy. You are not a democracy. You're a representative democracy. Each of you occupies, I hesitate to say a privileged place, but it's a unique place. You are here representing your district. You are also here representing the public at large throughout Franklin, both the voting public and the non-voting public. And that's a very important role to play. How matters more than what? And I was going to write sometimes, but I don't like using a lot of words in PowerPoints. Sometimes how you do your business matters more to the community than what you ultimately decide. There are a number of communities, and I'll give you an example of my own political history a little bit later on, where we get wrapped up in fights that, quite frankly, don't do the community any good. I remember being told when I was a school board president, you guys are the most entertaining thing on TV on Monday nights. That was not meant to be a compliment. The public watches us in representative positions, and how we conduct our business quite often reflects on the community and reflects in the community. So sometimes how we do our business matters more than the business itself. It is important for you to understand that at times you will wear different hats. At one time or another, you're a legislator. You have discretion to act in whatever way your personal philosophy, your thoughts, your personal sense of direction for the city leads you to go. But there are other times when you have to sit almost like a judge and apply the law, setting aside your own personal opinions, setting aside your own personal desires. Sometimes you have to be a legislator. Sometimes you have to be, we fought over this word, but adjudicator is the best one I could come up with. And what I need to say at this point is you have to rely on your municipal attorney at that time and your professional staff to tell you when you're wearing one hat and when you're wearing another, because how you behave in those different circumstances will be different. It will differ. Oversight is a primary position or a primary purpose of local governments. How many of you have any of you ever seen the movie All the Queen's Horses? If you want to lose sleep at night, watch that movie. It is about how a clerk in Illinois,
Yeah,
Dixon, Illinois, where Ronald Reagan was born. It is a clerk that took that community for over $50 million in fraud. Your oversight matters. I don't mean this in any way as an aspersion on any of your staff, but oversight matters. The buck starts here. I was tempted when I wrote this PowerPoint to say you are, the taxpayers, that sometimes you are the tax spenders. That's your job. And putting a budget together that moves your community forward is a critical part of your role here. And then lastly, nobody acts alone. There are 7 of you there. If you don't, as individuals, you have no authority. And that's hard to say, but it's also important to understand. No one alder has any authority unless that authority was specifically granted to him or her by the entire council. And a lot of people that come into local elected office struggle with that, particularly if they're a successful entrepreneur or they're a person who's in the business of making decisions and moving things forward. Because quite frankly, government moves slow sometimes. We don't move necessarily at the pace of business, where I own a business, I make a decision, I call somebody, I tell them it's done. You can't work that way. You have to work as a body, and if it's not a majority, it's not anything. So nobody works alone. This list of best practices, again, is not just something I pulled out of my hat. This is something that has come together collectively with my experience, also the experience of 2 attorneys with Matt's input and with the input of others that have worked in local government for decades. The first and most important is civility. It sometimes seems that it's entertaining to be incivil, but the reality is it's actually very damaging. It's financially damaging. Without going into too big a detail, I don't know if Matt wants me to say this, so I'll probably get in trouble. The biggest financial loss that League Insurance has ever suffered was the result of a city council decision. A city council that didn't like a land use decision that it had to make, so they made a decision that was inconsistent with their own ordinances. And that ended up costing that city and their insurance company millions of dollars. Incivility can take you down paths that just get in the way, they make meetings take longer, and you end up with poorer results. I was a little frightened or almost shocked. There's a retired police chief in Wisconsin who gives talks on active shooters in schools and in other areas, and just various the things that we worry about most that we don't ever want to see on TV when it comes to our communities. And this retired police chief, and this was about a month ago, someone asked him, well, what do you watch? What are you keeping an eye on? And the first thing he said was, well, I watch the city council and I watch the school board. What he was saying was, what's happening at school board meetings, what's happening at city council meetings will quite often be a reflection of the mood of the community. Just something to keep in mind. Listening. Again, we have all heard this since kindergarten. But the reality is, even if you have to make a decision that individuals will disagree with, they will quite often have more respect for the people making the decision if they felt they've been heard. And sometimes in government, this can make a meeting take a long time. But listening is absolutely critical. Listening to one another is also important. Related to that is formality, and I wrote in parentheses, I'm not kidding, because actually if I sometimes tell councils or village boards, if you don't like each other, and by the way, this happens quite often throughout Wisconsin, you can fall back on formality. You don't have to like one another to make motions and take votes. The formality also sends a positive signal to your community that you're truly trying to act in their best interest, even though there's division. House rules. I believe you have a council code of conduct, or
Been
Duffy?
tabled.
Sorry.
It's on hold.
It's on
We've had
hold.
one, but it's on hold for now.
Okay. I always encourage cities and villages to do something like that. The best time to do it is right after the election when you're doing your organizational meetings, because it's also, by the way, a good time to review these things with new council members that are coming in and with council members that either haven't worked with them or haven't seen them in a long time. The other thing about Wisconsin is every city council runs just a little differently. It actually makes our job kind of challenging because there is no cookie cutter set up for a city council. Some places have a council mayor administrator form of government. Some have a council manager. There is no mayor form of government. Some have a council mayor department heads form of government. And then the number of committees is all over the map. The level of authority assigned to the committees is all over the map. What I'm saying is it's different for every community. I can't tell you what Franklin's is and whether it's right or wrong. But what I can tell you is that the 7 of you have an obligation to one another to kind of review that so that you know what those house rules are. It will, over time, make things operate more efficiently. Planning and goal setting. I don't know. The city, I assume, has a comprehensive plan. I don't know, when was the last time it was updated? Do we know? Everybody in Wisconsin's overdue. That's not unusual,
Mid-90s.
mid-90s. Yeah.
Oh, that was the UDO. Sorry.
That was a what?
Unified Development Ordinance.
Ah, okay. Good.
2010,
14 years.
UDO was 90.
Yeah. I won't, I would have to say I suspect a majority of Wisconsin cities, their comp plans are overdue.
It's been amended many, many, many times. Now doing it all.
And it's hard. It's hard when you've got, I saw the May agenda, the board meeting that went on for 5 hours. And I looked at the agenda.
That's a sharp one.
Okay. But I looked at the agenda and there was a lot of ground that you were covering. There's a lot going on here, obviously. And I'm not stupid. There's also a lot of angst over a couple of issues as well. But it's hard when you're that busy to sort of take a step back and say, okay, what do we want to be in 10 years? What do we want to be in 5 years? What do we want to focus on? If you can get to that day, you will find your meetings are shorter. I made a note that I chair a school board. I have for 16 years. We have 4,000 students at a fairly sizable budget. If our meetings take more than 45 minutes, I get cranky. It is possible. It is absolutely possible. But part of it is you as a body have to put in the time on the front end to agree on what your goals are and to set those goals and to work toward those goals. Related to that, onboarding the new people. As I said, I don't know why it is we think here in America that when you were born, you knew how to say the Pledge of Allegiance and you knew how to make a motion. We don't know Robert's Rules of Order. We're not born with it. It's not necessarily the most natural thing in the world. And I think taking the time to onboard at perhaps after the next election will be very worthwhile to your community. The last thing was actually, I learned this from a city attorney. I was out at an insurance conference in Utah about 3 weeks ago, and there was a gentleman, much like Mr. Wesolowski, been representing local governments for a long time, and his comment was, yes, there's a time and a place to seek consensus. There's also a time and a place to just take the vote and move on. You know, if you're in the majority, you're in the majority. Enjoy it for now. It'll change. If you're in the minority, sorry, you're in the minority. You lost. Move on. It'll change. Too often, we will try to find consensus. And I will tell you that I represented the development industry for 20 years. And quite often, developers will tell you that is the most expensive proposition ever because they keep getting sent back to the drawing board. And every time they're back at the drawing board, they have to pay their engineering firm another $10,000, another $20,000, another $30,000. And all too often, after about 3 revisions, you find you're right back where you started from. There is a time when you should simply say, okay, we know enough. We've heard the public. We've had all of our concerns satisfied. Take the vote and move on. You can't have best practices without having worst practices. And I want to explain that picture. That is a high school built in 1892 in the community where I live, Stoughton. That building sits right in the middle of their middle school campus, and that building is vacant. It has been sitting there empty for about 30 years. We went to referendum one year, but me and other board members were right in the middle of some, what I would love to call in hindsight, some just plain old childish, foolish infighting. We went to referendum without nearly enough money to rehab that building the way it needed to be rehabbed. But we also created an environment where the historic preservation people in the community got that put on the National Register of Historic Places. The superintendent of schools didn't want that building to stay there to begin with. It's a white elephant. They have no use for it. And the board members just didn't want to deal with it. So we sort of let it go to referendum, let it get listed on the Register of Historic Places. The referendum paid for that nice new roof that you see, but nothing else. And that building for the last 30 years has sat there vacant. So that was sort of me exercising the wrong way of doing local governance and one of the consequences of it. What the right thing to do would have been to sit down and try to find a reasonable middle ground, whether it meant destroying the building or finding some sort of practical reuse for the building. But we didn't do that, and now we have a big waste of space. I think they're paying to heat it as well. Another worst practice that we see all over the state, I'll call it micromanaging. You could also call it not staying in your lane. Elected officials showing up in offices of department heads, trying to give them guidance. That's not your lane. This goes back to you are one of seven, and unless the seven acts, you have no power. Too often we find local government officials, this is actually more prevalent in village boards because they don't necessarily have a mayor, but too often one of the village board members will be talking to the public works director and telling him or her how to plow streets, or talking to the head of IT and telling them what's wrong with their computer systems. Again, it's not within your authority, and it just makes everybody's life harder, including yours. Breaking the rules, and these could be the House rules, or heaven forbid, open meetings law, open records law, and on and on and on. If you're walking outside of the rules, even if it doesn't create legal problems for you, it will slow the process down. It will result in more poor decisions. Wearing the wrong hat, I talked about this earlier. If you are, I'm going to trip up on this one because I'm not an attorney, but if you are supposed to be acting in a quasi-judicial manner, that's not when you can be applying your personal legislative powers. And these are very fraught areas. Frankly, we see them too often where you really need to rely on municipal council. Rudeness gets back to civility. It's the opposite of civility. Back when we were arguing about old 1892 high school there, most of our council meetings were entertaining to the public because we were being so rude to one another, and we really didn't accomplish anything. Pet projects is another name for saying taking up everybody else's time with a project that's going to fail 6-1. I mean, if you've got any support for your idea, great. But if you're the only person on the council that wants to support your idea, take the vote and move on. Quite often, too much council time is taken up with pet projects that aren't going to get anywhere. And then the other side of that is not deciding. Going around in circles forever and ever and ever, trying to find a middle ground that doesn't exist. I sense myself doing most of the talking, but any questions or? Okay. What's that? There's 6 alders.
No whispering at public meetings.
Well, she was just pointing out to me there are 6 alders. So the mayor here typically does not vote?
Love to break the tie.
Different in so many cities. Okay, and I want to finish by acknowledging, this is my last slide, by the way, other than this one that says, when in doubt, call us. By acknowledging that you're going to deal with some issues that are always going to be difficult. You know, even if you all, gave each other a hug before every meeting, you are still going to deal with some issues that are challenging. Your powers as a council are not the same as if you were a department head or a staff. What that means is you have to wield power through persuasion. You have to get 1, 2, 3, 4 You have to get 3 other people to agree with you in order for you to accomplish anything. You're not the public, which means you don't have the luxury of simply complaining about it on a surface level. You actually have to dig into it, understand it, and find the money to fix it, which is always a challenge. You're the ones who get to decide, but you're also the ones that have to decide. This one is hard too. Public will doesn't always equate to public good. There are times when this room will be full. I've seen it. I've lived through it. Many of us have lived through it. And it's really, really hard when you know that whatever that crowd wants is not necessarily what is in your community's best interest. You have an obligation to do what is best for your community. Whether or not that'll get you reelected, to speak very frankly, is some things you sometimes have to balance. And saying no is hard. Nobody wants to say no. Well, some people. Some people like to say no. I don't like to say no. Matt likes to say no.
He does.
No.
He does.
No.
But my last comment is, once again, to remember that how you do things sometimes makes more of a difference than what. And that is because over time, you're going to make several hundred decisions over the course of this year. They are not all life and death, but about 97% of them become a lot easier if you adopt this sort of general, if not collegiality, at least formality in operating, and just go through your business in a business-like way. You will find that most of your work gets a lot easier. And then, when in doubt, call us. That's my cell phone. That's my email address. Feel free to give me a buzz at any time. As often as not, I may hand you off to another staff person because I'm the generalist. I'm not the specialist. I love to play lawyer, but my lawyers always cringe when I do that. So I try not to be too serious about it. That's my prepared presentation. I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you, share ideas, talk about any concerns or specifics. Matt, if there's anything obvious that you think I missed.
Not missed, a few other comments from our side. A lot of this kind of falls, I'll say, in the court of public opinion, right? Which can often be the harshest. We play a lot as your insurance company in the legal court. And let me tell you, sitting for depositions isn't fun, right? So we're just trying to help communities around the state. So what we say is, a lot of times, if you don't know, stop, slow down, ask. Jesse's a great resource, right? It's his role to say, hey, we're veering, away from our ordinance here, or we're talking about an employment issue that we shouldn't be talking about here, right? So these are the things that kind of get us in trouble. To the onboarding process, you want to get people started on the right foot, to Jerry's point. And there's nothing wrong, too, with people that have been on, a council board to mastering the basics, right? You see it all the time in athletics or any other business. If you master the basics, that's how you become really effective and build the details around that. A lot of people in this day and age say, I want to get elected because I want to do this. Well, that's all fine, and once you get elected, by all means, but have that onboarding process in place that's really comprehensive. Because what happens if, okay, our finances are set up to not do that, right? We have this priority, that priority. Our public works departments does this. I didn't really know that. Our attorney does this for us. I didn't know that, right? So that can sometimes, help further those ideas along or stop them when they should be stopped. Not that they're wrong. It's just the way it is, right? Everything that goes on in the city isn't only happening with this council at this moment. It's all the councils in the past. And think about the ones that are coming ahead. So my other thing would be think ahead, especially with planning. Jerry mentioned land use, zoning issues, massive for us, massive. Our insurance company is basically a not-for-profit company. It's all municipal money. We don't want to charge more premiums than we have to. And the more we can reduce things like that cost a lot of money, really help everyone, including yourselves. So think ahead, right? That comprehensive plan that master land use plan, whatever you want to call it. Think ahead about what you want the community to be and how that wants to operate. And that'll save you a lot of headaches, So the final thing would be conflicts of interest. I don't know of anything here, but we see it all the time in cases. And as soon as it comes up, we're sunk. We're in a bad spot. And that's where that court of public opinion can sometimes be even worse than the legal loss we're going to see. So just a few tips. Again, call us. We're here for you. We work with 600 and some cities and villages in the state. We've got the answer probably somewhere. So
if you don't mind, at this point, we'll have council members ask questions,
sure.
perhaps give scenarios. Anybody wants to start? Alderwoman Eichman.
Where can we get our hands on a copy of that manual that you referenced earlier in the meeting? I never knew it existed.
The big elected officials manual?
Yeah.
Yep.
Online on our website, there is an order form for all of our publications, and you can order one online.
If we were to order one for the city, which I think would be the best bet to do, so we'd have a hard copy here that an alder or anybody could check out that works here, and I don't want it disappearing. I'm saying that we should, to look at. We'll probably be on it tomorrow, along with more of these, because these are really, I've been looking at these, but we'll probably order that big, thick document to have here at City Hall. But is it an updated, new?
It hasn't been, that particular document has not been updated in a couple of years. So if you have one, and I suspect, yeah, I didn't hear that, but yeah, you could copy it.
Or I can order one for.
A nice new fresh one.
Yeah. I was going to suggest that, Mayor, that we could leave it in there, but then check it out, take it home.
Or it disappears.
Yeah.
Be on
On the black
eBay.
market. Yeah. Yeah, kind of. I mean, just so we know who has it.
We can.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Last week, I was up in Northeast Wisconsin doing a regional meeting, and I had a new alder come up to me, and he was embarrassed to admit he didn't know how to get something on the agenda. I mean, it is really, we overlook sometimes. And then 2 years ago, I had a mayor, newly elected mayor, sit down with me in a panic. He had no idea how to run a meeting. We sort of, the only job interview you have to do is the ballot box here, which is great, but it doesn't really tell you how to do the mechanics of the job. So
Now that question, you've still got the floor.
apologies.
That's all I was going to say, but I was going to say, not that I've read through all of them as of yet, but I've ordered numerous materials too, like off of Amazon, Robert's Rules books. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. And I think our public library has some too. That's it for now. Thank you.
Sure. So, for example, that question, how does something get on the agenda? I sat as an alder, District 6 down there for 2 terms, that's 6 years. And the rule prior was we had the mayor sets the agenda. And the 2 alders, if they wanted to have something, had to be put on that way, but the mayor set the agenda. Then it was, 2 alders can call a special meeting. And everything went all over the world. And then when I got in here, there was still confusion about who sets the agenda. So in your opinion, who sets the agenda?
It depends what your local ordinance says. You should have a local ordinance, or would you call it a resolution? I think it's an ordinance that spells that out, because in Wisconsin, it can be very different. I will tell you that the league has opined that no single individual, including the mayor, has sole authority to set the agenda. But there should be an individual or individuals who are the organizers of the agenda. Quite often what will happen is an alder will contact the clerk or the mayor or the mayor and say, can we talk about this on the agenda? Now, it is reasonable to say to that person, okay, is this just your idea? Are there others who may support this idea? The league has a legal opinion on that. But the answer to your question, Mayor, is you should have an ordinance that specifies that. And if the ordinance implies that any one individual controls that exclusively, we think your ordinance should probably be reviewed.
And I think it should be as well, but for the 6 years prior, it was crystal clear made to me that the mayor sets the agenda. And that's just how it was. Mayor sets the agenda. And that's how we will, until I got here. And then now there's questions. Well, who does this and where and why and fingers like this? And I'm looking for the simple way in which if an alder wants something put on the agenda, we can put it on the agenda. But we've been doing it, I've been doing it as past practice, that if 2 alders want something on the agenda, it goes on the agenda. And I think, that's
That's
just,
a good practice.
that's just the practice.
Is that what the code says?
But as far as setting the agenda itself, that's kind of what, I think it should be made a little more clear then, because it wasn't made clear about how we're moving forward.
Yeah.
And to your point, how can we streamline things to not have insane 7-8 hour, we had a 2:44 a.m. ending meeting that started at 6:30 p.m. I mean, we have that much going on in the city. We are a very, very fast-growing city with 36,000 people, and we got a lot of things going on. We got closed session items with litigation. We got all sorts of things going on that we can't have a 45-minute meeting. I mean, I've had them here as an alder when they come in, but it was like, that white deer named Penelope that flies around here. It's as rare as seeing that white deer. We actually do have white deer. Alderwoman Day.
I thought, is this a metaphor I don't understand?
No, we do. We do have a white deer that's all over the community pages.
But,
Penelope.
but that, yeah, if that's what your code says, it should be made clear to all alders, and that's what your policy is.
Alderwoman Eichner.
City Attorney trumps me, and I'll speak after him.
I don't trump anyone.
Oh.
I work together with her.
Well, no, I know. I just somewhat trying to add
Okay,
some
all right,
humor,
hold
but
on. City Attorney.
Just historically through the years, her recollection, and I know it was in writing, and that might have been in work with the administrator. Her recollection, the mayor just said, mayor sets the agenda, and I think it was in writing on something or another, not a resolution or anything, just a mayor administrative document, and basically went by way of consent. The council was aware of it, et cetera. And then in the code, on top of that, if there was an alder person, ask a mayor to put something on the agenda, the mayor says no. Then there's 2 alder persons, can call a special meeting, so the answer was, well, then that should be able to go on the agenda, otherwise a special meeting is going to be called and it's less efficient.
Yep.
So one of my least favorite things that anyone could tell me is we do it this way because that's the way we've always done it. That's a terrible reason. So-
I saw that in writing somewhere over the last few days too. I'm just telling you the fact
Yeah.
though.
But you guys get to decide what you want it to be going
right.
forward.
Right.
That's it. And that's the best case scenario for all of you.
And I think looking at this as a reasonable outcome to say the mayor sets the agenda, however, if 2 alders want something on, it goes on. And it seems to be what works well. It's a fair and reasonable way, I think. And if the council wishes to make some changes to it, then the council can make changes.
Yeah.
I mean, whoever sits here shouldn't have ultimate authority, as it was, made clear to me when I sat down there for 6 years, how things work. And you went along with that. But there was more than one occasion where it was like, no, this will not go on. 2 alders need to make it. Alderman Eichman, back to you.
okay, kind of a repeat of what each you and the city attorney said. I was always under the impression when I took this seat that it was either the common council president or 2 alders, with the discretion of who's ever in the center seat of if they'll put it on the agenda or not. Because there's been times where I've presented things that have never made the agenda. There's been times where I've presented things and I've respected that I've received a phone call to discuss it and talk about it, why maybe it shouldn't be on the agenda, a different idea of timing of when it should be on the agenda. But definitely, I mean, I've had things shot down in the past of trying to get things on the agenda. I don't think we ever really had anything black and white back when you were an alder mayor.
Well, I'm
I
just
don't know. I
looking at
mean,
you
I don't know.
for-
We're all kind of. I mean, I don't know. It'd be nice if we had something like this is how it is, but isn't it always somewhat under discretion? Like, what if one of us came up with a really wild idea and you felt, Mayor, that maybe it wasn't appropriate or maybe it wasn't appropriate for that particular meeting? I'll use the True Life example. When I wanted to put trick or treat on the agenda extra early this year, because I was concerned about the cutoff of the city newsletter. That was the one and only one reason why I thought we had to decide on when trick or treat was going to be well before the school year was even recessed. And then you called me and discussed it with me, and you said, "Oh, what do you think about this idea, Michelle?" And I thought, "Yep, that sounds good to me, Mayor." We came to an agreement and held off on it.
Which was to wait till the next newsletter,
Yeah,
which
which
was just
was-
before, which
right,
made more
Right,
sense.
which I thought was fair. You addressed it. We spoke about it, talked through it, and I thought that was great. Instead of you just saying no, it's not going to be on there or something. I like the approach, how you handled that as one example. That's all I have to say at the moment.
Madam?
We do have a ordinance on common council. Consider and
I think there's a couple, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but I think be careful when you do that, that whoever the two are, you don't presuppose what the outcome should be. In other words, we want Halloween trick-or-treating to occur between these hours. That's what we want on the agenda. And be especially careful, and I'm sure your attorney's already worried about this. Make sure it's not four of you asking for something to be on the agenda with a predetermined outcome, because then you've just violated the open meetings law. So, I mean, you need to, what to deliberate, yes, but what you want done, no.
That's a good one. Could you say that again? That makes perfect sense. Could you say that one more time? About
What you
would
want,
not violate an opens meeting law.
right, what should go on the agenda is what you want to deliberate, not what you want the outcome to be. And I think, just as a general rule, I don't think four of you should ever make a request. Well, I'm starting to play attorney here, and I want to stop. This is where you should take guidance from your attorney.
I always say limit it to just two. Technically, you can possibly go up to three, but
Don't, yeah.
and that's attending other board commission meetings or meeting outside of a council.
Yep.
I like the back page here. Open meetings laws violations may result in a $25 to $300 forfeiture and may be subject to further legal action. $25. We've been getting the fear hit into us from Jesse about. So that's one thing. I guess going back a little bit was how we talked about acting alone and taking, if the council acts as a body, that the body said, go to the finance director and get a report based on X, Y, and Z, opposed to an individual going to the finance director and saying, I want a report on X, Y, and Z. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, don't do that. No, I'm sorry. You stated it correctly, Mayor. Each individual, each of the six, has no authority on their own, period. They have no authority other than to vote. If they are, and many cities don't operate this way, but if your city chose to instruct Alder Day to do what you said, the body could do that. On her own, Alder Day, unless she was the finance chair and your committee structure said you and the finance director can develop reports, she has no authority to do that. And it is destructive. It is destructive, it is time consuming, it creates all sorts of swirls and eddies among your professional staff. And I don't know any of your staff, but I will also say this. We are heading into a generation where maintaining professional workforce is going to continue to get harder. And many staff will not work in a community where there's a lot of infighting going on at the council level. So no, it's critical that you as individuals recognize that you have a very important and very special role in this community. But that role is one of 6, and there's no power that you have unto yourself. We live in Wisconsin, so I always think snow plowing. You have no authority to stop the snowplow driver and say, oh, by the way, you missed my neighbors, and I want you to do a better job down that way. You cannot do that. It creates all sorts of legal problems for doing so.
Alderwoman Day,
I have
since you were
two-
mentioned.
Yes, right, I know. I have 2 questions. One is just a little bit further clarification on the point you were just making. Let's say, though, on one of our council agendas, there is something to do with, I'll pick on our city engineer because he's right in front of me. So say there's a project that is on there that I am not a city engineer. I don't know much about it, and I have questions. So sometimes it is easier for us to, in person, find them at the office and ask questions about the agenda item. You're not saying that that isn't appropriate because it is a council action item that you are trying to get more information on to have an informed discussion about at the meeting.
Alderwoman Day, is Alderwoman, am I addressing?
Either way, I don't care.
That's a tough one. And what I would want to say is, what is the norm of your council? And I would almost suggest that you would want to check with the mayor, because there's such a fine line between, I just want someone to explain this to me, which is a perfectly legitimate question. But it's a very fine line from there to guiding either overtly or covertly their recommendation or pressuring them. I would almost recommend to a body, and I'll be objective about this. I would almost recommend to an alder, if you want to do something like that, check with the mayor first, rather than just doing it as a matter of course. Because the other thing that would happen is that behavior starts to duplicate itself. I mean, if someone sees you doing that, well, that made perfect sense. So Alderman Hassan is going to do the same thing with Public Works when he has a Public Works question. Or the alder over here is going to go talk to the IT department. It's a slippery slope. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. So in that vein, I guess my question would be, then would it be your recommendation that if you are a department director or you're somebody that has an agenda item on the council meeting, that you should then be expected to be at the council meeting so that if there are questions, because many times staff will have things on the agenda and they don't come to the meeting. So, or they're not required to come to the meeting. So they don't, and there's no other recourse to ask them questions, because if they're the subject matter expert and they're bringing the item to you, if it's a slippery slope to ask them outside of the meeting, then is it fair to say that if you have an agenda item that you want the council to discuss, you should be at the meeting?
As you've laid it out, my answer would be yes.
Okay.
At some point, you need, that's what these people are. They're your subject matter
Sure.
experts. But they can't be that if you have no access and ability to communicate with them.
Yeah, so I have no issues, pulling back and not, whipping off a quick email or a quick phone call to somebody before a meeting to get clarification on it. But then I would like to say, if you have an agenda item, I think it's fair that that person then has to be here in case there is a question.
You could also create a process for everyone to go say, Kelly, as the director of administration, I'd like you to decide.
Mr. City Engineer?
For what it's worth, I can't speak for the department. I much appreciate all that. That's past history. Got your question. I will just do appreciate the phone call. Tell you more about this. If nothing else, I guess I'll get back to you. Or I'll have an answer.
And I think the best answer for that is what Matt said. You as a body establish a process that works for you, but don't just make it up on your own and assume on your own authority. Yeah, Because every city is going to be different.
So perhaps when we get around to resurrecting whatever that document is that we have on hold, maybe that's something that we have to add to it so that there is some sort of protocol that is what is followed, that everybody does moving forward. My second question quickly before I yield is it's off topic. We haven't talked about this yet, but looking for kind of your opinion on this, the use of personal email and personal cell phones for communication when you are an elected official. First, your opinion on whether that is good, bad, or indifferent, and the second part of that question is whether that is subject to open record requests.
The answer to the second part is easy, yes it is.
Okay?
As soon as you text a city official a question on your personal cell phone, everything on your personal cell phone becomes searchable. So if the city offers you a city email address, I'd take it. And then put all your municipal communications on that. Because otherwise, everything is searchable. And you don't get to decide what people can and cannot look at on your phone or on your personal computer.
A lot of times we see this in litigation where they're looking for the violation.
Yes. Thank you for that. I appreciate the straightforward answer because it goes back and forth depending on who you ask. So I appreciate your opinion on that.
Well, and I'll tell you, I carry one phone around. I don't like carrying two phones. If I were sitting up there, I'd carry two phones. I'd have a city phone, I'd have a personal.
Alderwoman Day does.
Yeah, I
She's
do.
I think she's the only one of us six.
So,
that
Mr.
does.
City Attorney, and back to Alderman Eichman.
I thought everybody was obviously aware that text messages, everything were public records when they're for public business. It's with the handouts for staff and elected officials. But with regard to phone calls to staff, I just see that as an efficient method of helping everybody work together as opposed to creating some kind of control or something.
That's a slippery slope.
I don't see it that way.
I think the body itself should decide. And frankly, the body perhaps in communication with your senior staff. You know, if your senior staff are comfortable with that, and that seems like the best way to work, maybe that is the best way to work. But I don't think any one alder should just take it upon themselves out of the blue to start doing that. Maybe that's the way I put it. Jesse, you may disagree, but I just think get used to acting as a group of people instead of as individuals. And just sort of get that into your head.
But I think that is acting as a group. You know, these thick agendas, and the council members are working around the clock on this, as well as having other employment, et cetera, and they have a question, they can get it answered in 2 minutes or 4 minutes instead of, oh, I need to go take this step to go through this, to go through that, and then you're going step by step, and it's time consumption versus efficient, just get an answer.
Whoa. Government is still. Well, and I mean, you know, you heard Mr. Morrow. If your senior staff are comfortable with that, and if the body is comfortable with that, then I think that works. But I think just it happening randomly is an invitation to challenge it. And I say it because I've seen it.
Before we go to, it'll be Alderman Eichman, but hold on one point, Eichman and then Craig. So I guess the to make this, in my opinion, as simple as you can, if it's something that's up on upcoming agenda, our agendas come out on Fridays. And if you see the agenda, like, wow, I got a quick question on this, you've got the rest of the day Friday, hopefully we can get them out earlier, depending, our cutoff time is 9 a.m. And then you've got all day Monday, and you've got all day Tuesday until the meeting starts. Now, that's one thing to clarify a question on an agenda item. The other thing is going into a staff member and saying, hey, Len, can you pull the file on XYZ project? I need to know the X, Y, and Z about, that's a problem. that's a problem because now he has to be feeling the sense of obligation, stop everything or add to his, that's the rain, stop everything or add to his daily duties. And again, well, what do you mean you need this? It's not on the agenda. This is something you're asking for whatever, or a financial question. Can you run me a report on, the update on TID 7, something, what? I mean, why? What's your underlying theme here? Okay, is it just, what's your mentality on this? And I'll yield for a minute, Alderman Eichman and Alderman Craig.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. You just sort of touched on, I want to go back to a cell phone question after this real quick, but you sort of just touched on where I was getting at. I mean, it'd be nice if we could come up with some policy, and I guess my question is, the mayor technically doesn't have the authority to tell us alders what we can and can't do, right? Because I've gone to the mayor before and said, Mayor, can you express this to the council? And he's come back with the answer, Michelle, that's, I don't have that, that's not my authority, my position. For example, I think, for example, the finance director, I'll just pick on her for a moment because she's not here. She's working on a lot of numbers, crunching, trying to focus, concentrate in her office on a project, and somebody just in the middle of the blue walks into her office and interrupts her. She's working on a big project and demands answers right there and then, or sits in front of her at her desk wanting some answers or reports run or whatever right there and then. I mean, I just always feel the polite thing to do, not that I'm always perfect, because I am not, but I try to ask ahead of time. Like I'll try to, for example, not that long ago, I needed something from Glenn. I emailed Glenn. Glenn, when may be a good time for me to come in and meet with you on this? And Glenn lets me know when a good time would be. Kind of like almost in a way by appointment only, instead of interrupting the workflow of someone's day, because everyone here under this roof is is always so busy in the middle of so many different things. So, if we could set some type of process for that, so everyone's on the same page of that, that would be great. Touching base real quick on the back to the cell phone verification question that Alderwoman Day presented. So our cell phone, I know each municipality is different. We are not issued city laptops, tablets, nothing. We're not issued city cell phones. Everything that we use is our own personal device. We pay for, we buy. Some of us might not even pay for the phone that we're using. It could be on another work company phone or a family plan, or a list is endless of, of what it could be. So as far as that clarification, because we've heard so many different things on the open records requests. I mean, can they come into your house then and take take your computer?
They can request it.
Or,
Request information of it,
right,
and you have to provide it to, yes,
without a subpoena?
yes. Open meetings law. And that's the great risk of doing municipal communication on your personal device.
Right.
Is people can make open records requests, and because of the way the law is structured, the law assumes openness. And you don't get to decide, see this one, you can't see that one. And I won't even get into the legal side because I'm not capable of that, but we see it often.
Yeah.
That they'll in your computer.
Mm-hmm. And personal cell phone too. And then anything on your personal cell phone. So for example, you could see every picture that I have of my grandchildren as an example. It's mainly what I have on my phone. So, and then that becomes all open record when you take oath of a elected position in a municipality that doesn't provide
No,
you with your
Fourth
own
Amendment.
personal device.
It doesn't become an open record, but if they have your phone, they're going to see all of that. Okay? So a picture of your son or your daughter or whatever is not in and of itself an open record. But
It'd be looking for something specific,
they'll
like,
see it when they're looking for something else.
When you say they, could you be more specific? Because we've got about a handful, maybe less, of people out there that are nonstop open records requesters. Nonstop. Okay? When I say nonstop, I mean nonstop.
habitual.
Habitual. Thinking that there's the world of conspiracy is just floating through this area, and it's not. But to clarify Alderwoman Eichmann's point, I've got my cell phone, and someone says to me, I want all your text messages with this person that they're in like a fight with. that also is an elected. And I don't have any, but they are convinced. What are their options? If I say, no, I have none, then what's their next step?
I mean,
Does it rhyme with writ of mandamus?
anybody can see you.
Yeah,
Then it goes through the
But the onus is on them. Onus is not on me to say I have nothing and prove I have nothing. Onus is on them to prove that I have something.
not when it comes to the open records law necessarily, no. Okay, I have to stop here because I'm not an attorney. I don't know the answer to that question. I would consult with your attorney on that. But I will tell you this, Wisconsin's open records law is heavily weighted against, it's heavily weighted in favor of open. The law assumes that anybody sitting out here for any reason whatsoever, good, bad, or indifferent, has a right to know what you all have been saying. And how they can get at your cell phone is getting you're getting too close to an area I don't have enough training. Not a lawyer. I do not want to pass whatever I would say off as legal. But I would talk to your legal counsel about that because, yeah.
Well, our legal counsel doesn't even have a cell phone. So that's step one. So he doesn't have a cell phone. So that's part of the problem.
He probably has nice weekends free.
No, he does not have a cell phone. He does not have a cell phone.
Working
So
60 hours a weekend.
No,
Yeah.
Every weekend.
every weekend, hence the
Memorial
invoices.
Day, Mother's Day.
my point is, you need to have a conversation with legal counsel about that. Whether it's in-house counsel or separate counsel. Because now you're starting to get very, very specific.
Well, we are because there's a lot of, based on all the open records requests that are insane by just a handful or less of individuals that think there's a huge conspiracy. So what I think moving forward is the city provide cell phones to the electeds. And that way that, in my opinion, gets rid of that whole thing, whether we're communicating, and that's puts it away.
A lot of municipalities provide tablet computers to their electeds. And
Our school board has them.
I don't know about cell phones. I just don't, I don't know.
Some do.
laptop.
Okay. I'm gonna yield to go to Alderman Craig and then Alderwoman Day.
Thank you. I think that there's two things that I just want to kind of clear up as far as like a delineation here. There is a difference between open meetings law and open records, correct?
Yeah.
So, on your little pamphlet here, it says that open meetings law violations may be subject to further legal action. The fine is nominal, and it is what it is. But
And by the way, your insurance company or the city can pay that fine.
yep, it's a
That fine must be
personal.
paid personally.
Yep, got that. What would, and for openness in the context of the conversation, I am the subject of an open meetings law violation that was brought forward by an incredibly concerned citizen. So the question mark for me is, what would the further legal action encompass as far as that goes?
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer. Jesse?
Is this a Franklin matter?
Is not.
Okay, thank you.
I mean.
Is that-
I
Are you
made-
gonna
Just like,
answer?
I don't care anymore.
I mean, it's
Said
whatever.
it's not.
I know, but it's an example. He still gave an example. Perhaps you can still answer on a hypothetical example.
And what's the question?
What would be the further legal action beyond just the personal forfeiture?
They would be an action to obtain the information. If out there somehow in the real world, there is some actual, true, real damage that occurs because of a failure to not follow the open records request, that's a hypothetical, but
So it's not a records request, it's saying that there was a open meetings law violation. If you look at it. It is a novel legal theory as to the what, and the problem is that there isn't any established law regarding the scenario. When you talk of the digital media and how that can be kind of skewed as, is this considered a walking quorum based on membership to a Facebook group? Does a Facebook group with multiple members of an elected body constitute a walking quorum because you are part of a group that is not the public writ large, and instead is where administration of that group will either approve or deny entry? And so if myself, Alderwoman Day, Alderwoman Eichman, and Alderman Hofer are all in the really cool Franklin group on Facebook, is that then considered a walking quorum? If no business is being discussed, hence the whole, it is a novel legal theory behind the open meetings law violation complaint that has been filed against me.
If you're not discussing city business, it's no different than, you all belong to the same bowling league, or you all go to the same church, or you all shop at the same grocery store. No, that's not a walking quorum. You all live in the same community. That's not a walking quorum. There has to be evidence that you're actually talking about municipal business.
I understand, but that goes back then to if someone agrees with this legal theory and says, yes, that is a walking quorum, I want $300 from you, and then, as this says here, the possible further legal action. That's my question. My crux of my question isn't is this a walking quorum or not? My question is, if someone says it is, they take the personal forfeiture, and then what? What else is behind door number 3 that says, oh, by the way, because you violated open meetings law, you're also going to get, you're going to be put in the stockade in this town square and take 18 lashes. I don't know.
It's on the back right here.
I'm going to ask the attorney that wrote it, what else could be involved?
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Thank you.
Alderman Eichman.
Well, with that, Alderman Craig, and please correct me if I'm wrong. For example, let's say I'll use Alderman Hofer last week or the week before. He may have been one of the first alders to educate the public about the St. Columbus Road. So I saw what he posted. I saw Alderwoman Day commented, added to it. I stayed far and clear away from that post because I would have been the third person commenting on a city matter, which technically would validate being a quorum, possibly. So I had something to add and say to it, but I purposely did not because there had been 3 of us alders incorporated into the same Facebook post. Is that kind of what you were trying to ask, or?
Not at all.
Is that no, he's not. Is that a
Okay, you're
violation?
an outfield compared to where I am output to base.
I have a
at,
very specific, the complaint against myself and others is a very specific and pointed complaint. It is a specious legal theory at best. I think it is more of a headline chase than it is anything else, but that will be for corporate counsel of Milwaukee County to decide.
As a general, I don't know all of the local history. Clearly, there is history, there's tension here. I don't know all of it. I know little teeny bits here and there, but I don't really want to specifically speak to any of that. But to your comment about Facebook posts, you bet your boots, if an alder makes a comment about a topic and another alder comments on that comment, and then a third alder comments on that comment, you have just violated the open meetings law.
Yep,
Don't
I've seen that
do
happen.
that.
Got to be careful. You got to read every comment on a thread.
Because that does, I don't even think that's novel legal theory.
Oh, the novel legal theory is regarding a, yeah, it's,
Oh, this is Franklin Steps.
right, but it still has to do with.
Sure, it's a
open
scenario.
meeting law.
Yeah,
It's a scenario. It's a great scenario.
But
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's a bar or Facebook, same thing. I mean, if you get caught up in a conversation about city business, it's a quick and dangerous slippery slope. Just don't go there.
So the balancing us and holding things that are privileged city, at what point that the subject, at what point does that get disclosed?
Already did. Attorney-client privilege stays with the client. And if the facts in the world that cause that are gone, which may never occur, there's a lot more to it than just, okay, this was the scenario at the time and that matter has ended. It's still up to the client before it gets released. Client says no, it does not get released. It's not something that just goes away.
The reasoning for that topic has been because you settlement. So then that would not have been.
It depends whether or not it was attorney-client privilege. Or just other, in the one of the 1985 sub 1, whatever exceptions that was in effect at the time under the facts.
Yeah, Kelly, you're asking a question that I'm not competent in. Yeah, and I'm not even, I think there might even be a few levels of nuance here that even attorneys would disagree on, right, about attorney-client privilege. Beyond that, I don't think I should say anything, I just don't.
And whatever occurred historically on those, why don't you send that to me? So I could look at it.
Are you yielding?
Yes.
Alderwoman Day, then back to Alderwoman Eichmann? No? You're good? Oh,
I may have to hear, who knows?
never, right.
All right, I'm just going to go back in time a few minutes on two of the points. Back to the individual phones. I've worked in a previous municipality that I worked in, as well as when I worked for the city of Franklin in a different capacity. In both instances, I had a city-issued cell phone as well as my personal phone for the very reasons we're discussing up here. It can be done, and it can be done on the cheap. You're not going to get the latest iPhone. You're going to get something several generations back. But if all you're using it for is to do city business and take phone calls, you don't need the newest and fastest iPhone. So it wouldn't even necessarily be a drain on the city resources because the city already has a plan for the city. So it can be done. And I think there are a handful of folks that have city issued cell phones here. And then my other point is when we were discussing the instances of elected officials speaking to city staff, one of the core principles of the code of conduct that was put on hold, one of the core things of it was establishing sort of a decorum, I guess, for lack of a better word, for the elected officials in how they interacted with city staff, in so much as part of this was basically saying the alder does not direct city staff to do things for them for like personal reasons or for what they think is the betterment of the city, because harken back to 2020, that was going on. And you all, it wasn't the two of you, but you came in and did a training and basically said, you know what, not a good idea, stop doing that. So a document was created for that. And there were some people who were, after it was completed, very vocal about that part and wanted to absolutely have the ability to talk to city staff at any point about anything for any reason. And that was one of the core tenets that actually got it put on hold again because of that. So I find it really funny that we're harping on that when that was the very thing that certain people wanted it put on hold for, and that is something you're saying should absolutely be something that is legitimate and put back in place. So, I mean, I'll yield from that, but I'm pretty passionate about that topic for a variety of reasons. And so I find it ironic that that is a point that we're arguing about now when it was in place and we put the document on hold.
It's 7:50 PM. Alderman Craig has exited briefly.
Well, Alderwoman Day, I don't know.
Alderwoman Eichman, you've got the
Sorry,
floor.
were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know, if we're arguing about the code of conduct, are you even familiar with that, our Franklin Code of Conduct read? I should say read, exactly, because every municipality is different. So if I'm understanding this correctly, it's that we have the freedom to talk to any department head as an elected official. I am allowed to call Glenn, I'm allowed to email Glenn, I'm allowed to make an appointment with Glenn, but within discretion of, I'm not barging into Glenn's office every
Right.
day, twice a day, interrupting his projects and what he's working on and being point blank rude to him and not valuing the time that he has.
Yeah, the purpose of it was that, the purpose, I believe, when it was written and what was explained to me was that an alder could not on their own call up or stop by a department and ask a department to do something on their behalf that wasn't something that was either a direction of the council as a whole, or in the instance of there's a question on an agenda, I just need some clarification. It was making a phone call and saying, you will do this for me because I don't like X, Y, and Z. And that was what caused a lot of strife a few years ago. So that was put in place, and it was that if you had a question like that where you wanted a department director to do something, the way that document was written was that you were supposed to go through chain of command. So whether that person reported to the mayor, you're supposed to take that request to the mayor to decide if they wanted to disseminate that to the staff. If the person reported to the city administrator, it went to the city administrator, and then they would decide if that request would get disseminated down to staff, not the elected official directing them to do something.
Back to Alderwoman Eichman.
Thank you. No, I understand the directing them to do something, but I like the freeness of not having to have everything be filtered through the mayor. Well, the mayor is almost available 24/7. There are times where he may be in a meeting and I can't get a hold of him, and I do have a question for
Well,
Glenn or whomever, and then I know that I have the authority for the mayor that I can contact Glenn on my own and ask him without having to say, Mayor, may I have a permission slip to please contact the city engineer?
I'll clear that. 7:53, Alderman Craig is
So with
returning.
that, I yield.
Okay, just to clarify these 2 points, because I was on the council when that whole thing
And
happened.
I was not.
And the bottom line is still, there's a big difference between making a phone call and asking a question than coming there and directing and saying, can I get a printout of this? Can I get this? It's like you're giving them an assignment. They're not to give an assignment unless they're acting as the whole of the committee, the whole of the council. And that's where the two things are different. If you need to call Glenn, if you get a question, you call him. Because that's when I sat in that chair and said, you're going to tell me I can't call a department head? No. And I fought vehemently against that because that made no sense. Now, I never went downstairs to planning and said, can you print out the last 35, fence permit appeals that have come up? That's different. It's a question versus an assignment. And, when you're saying an assignment, you're acting on your own. You're not acting as a whole, you're acting as a solo. That's the difference. But you can always call, anybody here can call anybody at any time to make a quick call for a quick answer, but not an assignment. Yeah, we might as well, everyone else is filing open request. Well, not everyone, same 3 people. So,
More than that.
what do you have, anyone else right now? Seeing nothing further, gentlemen, anything further?
If you need us.
We will. Probably tomorrow.
Not yet tonight.
All right, thank you. Motion to adjourn?
So
Motion
moved.
to adjourn.
We have a first and a second
Second.
by Alderman Eichmann. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Motion carries. We are slowly going.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.